Raiden Shogun sits alone in her plane of euthymia. It's no secret that this Archon definitely withstands the test of time gameplay-wise, and also withstands the test of time visually, if you know what I mean. If there's anything guaranteed in this life, it's death, taxes, and Raiden Shogun being pretty strong, although maybe not lore-accurate levels of strong. You can hypercarry with Raiden and see some of the biggest electro damage numbers from the electro cast to this date, but you can also have her take the backseat and boost the team's damage output while also dealing her own damage off-field. To find the right Raiden build for your account, let's take a journey to explore some of the most popular Raiden Shogun setups from past to present to really understand what roles she can fill and how exactly you should build her for those specific roles. Believe it or not, Raiden Shogun's release was not all sunshine and flowers. There was actually some controversy surrounding her burst mechanics, which I should probably cover her burst mechanics right now before we get too deep into the video. Most players familiar with Raiden know that her elemental burst Giant Slash and the following 7 seconds of electro attacks will restore energy to the team and deal tons of damage with the various damage buffs within her own kit. Whether that be converting tons of energy recharge from your build into electro damage bonus thanks to one of her ascension talents, or having your team collect energy particles during battles to build up resolve stacks and boost the damage of her next burst, signified by the purple circle that slowly lights up behind your character. Where the old controversy arose is not with how much damage she's able to deal, but actually with her synergy with certain characters. Specifically, at the time of Raiden's release, many people speculated Beidou to be one of her best teammates with all the additional energy and elemental burst damage bonus Raiden could provide to Beidou. That is, until one line of text broke these two apart faster than the 2 wafers of a Kit Kat. You see, Raiden Shogun's electro attacks during her burst are considered elemental burst damage, meaning a character that specifically buffs normal attack damage like Yunjin does not work with her. Beidou's burst has one specific line of text that states, when normal and charge attacks hit, they create a lightning discharge that can jump between opponents dealing electro damage, with emphasis on the word hit. Because Raiden's attacks under her burst count as elemental burst damage by the game, it is not registering as normal and charge attack hits like Beidou's burst requires, and thus Raiden can never utilize Beidou's burst until the effects of her own burst wear off. That is not to say that these characters are impossible to run with each other, because the only thing stopping you from running the two characters together is your own creativity. For example, Raiden can be run with Beidou, Eula, and say Diona for a very well balanced Eula Hypercarry team. It's just that you should be prepared to use Raiden's burst and Beidou's burst at separate times in order for them to work together on the same team. Okay, with that out of the way, you might be asking, why does she work with other similar elemental bursts like Xingqiu or Yulan? Well, the answer again is hidden in the text. Yulan and Xingqiu's burst refrain from the wording hit by a normal attack. The game is coded in a way where these bursts don't care what type of damage the enemy is receiving, and all it cares about is that the player tap their normal attack button on their mobile phone or controller, or press the left click button on their mouse. And that is a completely long-winded way of saying welcome to Raiden Hypercarry Team Building 101. Xingqiu and Yulan are absolutely broken with Raiden, just like they are with 90% of the entire Genshin cast, and the historical teams exemplify that perfectly. To this day, one of the most powerful teams consists of Raiden plus 3 staple 4-star characters, Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett, where Yulan serves as sort of a newer alternative to Xingqiu. Many of you already know this team by its name, which is Raiden National, or Rational for short. With the high off-field damage and high burst costs from the Xingqiu and Xiangling duo, plus Raiden's team energy regen and a massive attack buff from Bennett, there's no shortage of damage in this team, and they all seamlessly synergize with each other. If you don't want to use all of these powerhouse 4-star characters together in one team, you can also look towards a Raiden Hypercarry team less focused on reactions and more focused on that screenshot-worthy damage at the start of her burst. The classic one-shot burst Raiden team consists of Bennett, Kujo Sara, Raiden, and Kazuha, but nowadays you have a little more agency than that thanks to Dendro. You can opt out of using Bennett and replace him with a Dendro character that can apply Dendro off-field like Yao Yao, Dendro MC, and Kole as some of the free-to-play friendly options, or Baiju/Nahida for your premium 5-star options. Additionally, Kujo Sara can be replaced by Dori or Kuki Shinobu for healing capabilities in case your Dendro characters lacks that, or in the case where you do have a Dendro healer, you can opt for other electro characters like Fischl or Yae Miko, who also deal great damage off-field. And of course, Kazuha now has a 4-star alternative in Sucrose because her elemental mastery buffs increase the potency of aggravate reactions created by Dendro and Electro. For any of my math nerds out there, aggravate can make up for a good portion of the buffing power lost with Bennett because the reaction operates on additional flat damage, which is multiplied by the copious amounts of electro damage bonus and elemental burst damage bonus that Raiden Shogun gains from her build. And speaking of Raiden Shogun builds, here's how to build your Hypercarry Raiden for the best results. The only artifact set you ever want to consider for a traditional Raiden build is the 4-set Emblem of Severed Fate. Raiden gets ridiculous value out of building energy recharge naturally with her Ascension talent and her record-setting 90 energy cost burst, and when you add in the 4-set effective emblem, there's just so much overlapping stat value that there's no reason to farm anything else for dealing electro damage on field. For artifact stats, choose energy recharge in the sands, electro damage in the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the circlet. There are arguments that an attack sands or an attack goblet can be substituted on Raiden, supported by endless spreadsheets and simulations, but as disappointing as this may sound, it ultimately depends on your own situation. The only hard rules that you need to know are that Raiden always wants 200% energy recharge minimum, and your build should try to at least very roughly balance her crit rate and crit damage at a 1:2 ratio. With their signature weapon Engulfing Lightning, even 250% energy recharge is recommended, and her build will always want to use energy recharge in the sands and electro damage in the goblet. Without her signature weapon, you can opt for energy recharge in the sands and attack in the goblet if your attack goblet has significantly better crit substats than your electro damage one. Or you can opt for attack percent in the sands and electro damage bonus in the goblet for slightly better damage in the case that you can already hit 200% energy recharge without using a main stat sands. Regardless, substat focus is pretty self-explanatory with energy recharge, crit rate, crit damage at the top of the list, with attack percent as an all-around good 4th substat, and elemental mastery for aggravate teams specifically. For weapons, there's quite a few tried and true options that a Hypercarry Raiden can use, which is very unlike the artifacts where only one artifact reigns supreme. Of course, her signature Engulfing Lightning can be up to 15 to 20% better than any other option on the table, but what else can provide at least some decent damage for an on-field Raiden? Well, possibly the best all-around option that most players should opt for is the Catch, which is a free 4-star polearm from the Inazuma Fishing Association. With an energy recharge stat and a passive that increases the damage and crit rate of the wielder's elemental burst, this polearm provides a little bit of everything to Raiden, making it the perfect 4-star weapon for her. 5-star options like Staff of Homa, Primordial Jade Wing Spear, or Skyward Spine can exceed the damage of an R5 catch by maybe 2 or 3%, but many players will not have access to these polearms. As for other polearms to consider that aren't 5-star, we have Wavebreaker's Fin, Deathmatch, and Favonius Lance in that specific ranking order following the catch. Wavebreaker's Fin is the newest polearm on this list and is the best 4-star polearm for pure damage if it is R5, but it is worse than catch until you hit about R3, depending on how high your team's total energy cost is. So in summary, if you don't have Engulfing Lightning, stop being lazy and go do your fishing. Fast forward about a year and we get the release of Sumeru. This region gave us just about everything we wanted, from giant areas that I have yet to finish exploring, Archon quests with actual decent lore drops, and of course the long-awaited Dendro element. To some people, these new Dendro reactions single-handedly saved the careers of characters like Kuki Shinobu and Toma, but I personally already thought the former did fine as a healer for my Eula team, and the latter did fine as a shielder for my Yoimiya team. Raiden, on the other hand, didn't really need to be rejuvenated as a character since plenty of people were already satisfied with her performance by this time. However, Hyperbloom did create a completely new playstyle and build for Raiden for players wanting to switch things up. It should be pretty obvious to most veteran players, but she and Kuki Shinobu are the perfect candidates for creating Hyperbloom reactions off-field thanks to their elemental skills that deal AoE damage. Other off-field electro characters like Fischl, Yaimiko, Beto, Lisa, etc. have elemental skills or elemental bursts that prioritize targeting enemies rather than the Dendro cores on the ground, making them much less reliable than Kuki or Raiden for triggering Hyperbloom. But I do want to note that there are a few differences between Kuki and Raiden in a Hyperbloom team that you should be aware of since they aren't identical in benefits. Kuki Shinobu's greatest strength is that she consolidates the role of a healer and a Hyperbloom trigger. Not only can her skill pulse to hit dendro cores around the active character, it also heals them based on Kuki's HP and elemental mastery, allowing you to not waste another party slot on a healer that provides no offensive elemental application to help create those dendro cores for Kuki to hit. Raiden's benefit is that her skill has a ridiculously long uptime and also provides some elemental burst damage bonus to teammates based on how expensive their burst is to cast. Kuki needs her C2 to truly have 100% skill uptime, although it's just a small quality of life constellation and doesn't really hinder her performance at C0. The biggest pitfall of Raiden when compared to Kuki is of course her lack of healing, which means another party slot usually requires a character that can ideally both heal and apply dendro or hydro to create dendro cores. That of course limits your character options, but don't be too afraid because there's still a decent variety to choose from. Generally, a Raiden Hyperbloom team consists of at least one dendro applicator and one hydro applicator in the next 2 slots and a healer in the final slot if you don't have one yet. Since Raiden will always be off-field, either the dendro or hydro applicators can spend the time on-field. Hydro has plenty of options like Ayato, Child, Neuvillette, Kokomi, or even Barbara as a last resort free option. Dendro has a smaller total pool of characters, so you can only choose between the limited 5-star characters of Nahida and Alhaitham for on-field dendro attacks, with Baiju as a niche option wherever you don't need tons of AoE dendro application. On the flip side, off-field options are plentiful with hydro characters such as Furina, Yalan, Xingqiu, and Kokomi, while dendro characters include Nahida, Yao Yao, Dendro MC, and Kole. The final slot can be any of the hydro or dendro options mentioned beforehand for easy plug-and-play options, but remember that if the 2 characters you selected aren't healers, pick Kokomi, Barbara, Baiju, or Yao Yao in the final slot. If you want to try something different, cryo characters like Diona/Layla for shielding or Rosaria/Kaya for consistent off-field cryo application are viable options to create what is known as a fridge team. Essentially, cryo does not react with dendro, allowing the 2 elements to exist on the enemy simultaneously, which in some situations can help your hydro character create bloom reactions more consistently. As for how to build Raiden for Hyperbloom, things do get a lot simpler. Artifact sets are confined to just the 4-set Gilded Dreams and the 4-set Flower of Paradise Lost. Gilded Dreams is a much more resin efficient set to farm since it is in the same domain as the dendro set Deepwood Memories, while Flower of Paradise Lost will give you a 3 to 5% edge in DPS depending on the quality of stats on your pieces. Because the damage gap is minimal, you should simply pick whichever one is readily available on your account. As for your artifact stats, triple EM in the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet is standard to maximize your Hyperbloom damage. Although it may sound a little boring gameplay-wise, Raiden never has to click her ultimate as an off-field Hyperbloom trigger, so don't worry about hitting 200% energy recharge like before. Substats should only look to maximize EM with crit, attack, and energy recharge providing very minimal boosts to her damage. Weapons are also fully EM focused with only Dragon's Bane, Moonpiercer, and Ballad of the Fjords as your recommended options. Dragon's Bane is technically a gacha 4-star polearm, but it can't be pulled even on the standard banner and provides a much higher EM stat compared to Moonpiercer. Moonpiercer is your free-to-play Sumeru craftable option that does have a passive that can buff the attack of one character that picks up the leaf created by a dendro-related reaction. Although its EM stat is only about half of Dragon's Bane, it is still a phenomenal option to choose. And now we finally reach the present day where yet again another enticing option for Raiden is introduced into the game. Who would have thought that in 2024 I would be introducing a Raiden overload team thanks to a certain purple-haired Nilo that has the complete opposite diet of a professional dancer. That's right, Chevreuse' whole gimmick matches that of Nilo, but instead she requires the entire party to consist of only Electro and Pyro characters to enhance the overload reaction by decreasing the Pyro res of enemies. I can't say much else about this team yet because of NDA and my plans to release this video probably a day or two before Raiden's rerun banner actually goes live, but if you're willing to try out this wacky team, it consists of Raiden, Chevreuse, a Pyro DPS, and a flex slot that usually takes a Pyro support like Bennett/Toma, or an off-field Electro like Beto/Fischl. In my experience, Overload is best played with either Yoimiya or Yanfei as the Pyro DPS thanks to their extremely long-range attacks. And as for Raiden's build, the full EM setup that uses the 4-set Gilded Dreams slots extremely well into this Overload team with Chevreuse, so nothing about new potential builds have emerged with Raiden since the new Fontaine patches. And to wrap up today's video, some of the other tried and true archetypes that aren't as popular as a team like Raiden National still hold strong, such as Sunfire, a classic taser team / electro charge team, and supporting Eula as a dual carry. The Eula team is pretty self-explanatory, and Eula mains are usually sweaty enough to already know that Raiden's burst damage bonus and superconduct support is valuable for Eula, so for the sake of not extending this video's length, we won't cover that team in depth today. All you need to know is that Raiden uses her standard energy recharge and crit build in this team, and fitting Eula and Raiden's burst into one rotation requires some tight execution, which means this pairing is more mechanically intensive than other pairings. The main team I want to finish things off with today is Sunfire, which many players have yet to explore. Sunfire is a reference to the League of Legends item Sunfire Cape, which constantly burns enemies around the wielder. That same effect is recreated in Genshin when you stack Bennett's Burst and Jean's Burst on top of each other. Doing so will swirl the self-application of Bennett's Burst from the active character onto surrounding enemies, providing an extremely powerful form of pyro application. Raiden can slot in here as an on-field Hypercarry with her electro damage build, or as an off-field overload trigger with her full EM build. The last slot is usually a Hydro character along the lines of Xingqiu, Yolan, or Furina in the case of using Raiden's burst on-field, or Ayato / Child in the case where Raiden strictly abuses her full EM build off-field. The result is a ton of swirl, vaporize, and overload reactions that are extremely satisfying to see alongside a super safe team with double healers during Bennett and Jean's bursts. But with that, that's all I have time for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this slightly differently formatted video compared to the other stuff on my channel, and most importantly, I hope it was helpful for building the perfect Raiden. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.